Well, Adrian Dix is British Columbia's Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions. Minister Dix, thanks for your time.
Great to be on CPAC.
As always, yes. Premier Eby says there have been conversations with the federal government, and I'd like to get deeper into that in terms of what's been talked about. What has been the BC government's specific message to the federal government when it comes to pipelines, when it comes to the tanker ban, and when it comes to these talks with Alberta?
Well, our position is very clear. There's no proponent, there's no project, there's no possibility of the kind of contracts, for no market, in other words, of the kind of contracts they need to go ahead with this, no route. And of course, proceeding would have a major impact on the tanker ban. And just to be clear, it's a tanker ban. And so the idea that you could do a tanker ban except for 650,000 barrels a day doesn't make any sense. We believe that that tanker ban is essential to a lot of the economic activity we're doing now on the West Coast, the multi-billion-dollar economy we have now, and the tens of billions of dollars of investment that are taking place on the West Coast. So we've been pretty clear about that, both publicly and privately over time. In addition to that, Alberta and Canada have better options, more efficient and more inexpensive options to proceed with. So from our point of view, it's a pretty straightforward issue. We haven't been, of course, in discussions, the current discussions as we understand it, really from media sources, I guess, in the Globe and Mail and elsewhere, that there are discussions between Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan and Canada on these questions of the BC coast, but certainly no discussions with us.
And so you've delivered that message, you say publicly and privately. What are you hearing back from the federal government? Has Ottawa communicated to you what is in this potential agreement with Alberta?
Well, with respect to any potential agreement with Alberta, no, we haven't heard anything. And of course, Alberta has every right, as we do, to have discussions with the federal government. So it's not the issue. But to the extent that this is a project that's primarily in British Columbia, obviously British Columbia and First Nations like the coastal First Nations, who have also not been engaged, play an important role. But any MOU doesn't change the fact that there's no proponent, that this required tens of billions of dollars of public subsidy, what's being proposed here. There's no route, and that there are better options. That doesn't change. MOUs don't change the reality of it, and MOUs don't change the fact that the tanker ban is essential to really massive economic development on the coast, where we have a social license to move on issues that are also national projects. But we in BC haven't been focused on this, I have to say. We've been focused on the major national projects that we have in BC, and it's why BC has significantly more of these projects than anyone else. It's because our projects are much more substantial, much more real. They're on the ground, and we've been working on them for some years.
Okay, but Premier Danielle Smith does keep saying that an agreement is close in the coming weeks. And if there is an MOU and that it does include some kind of federal backing for a new pipeline route, and that there is something more tangible on the table in that kind of agreement, what is the reaction going to be from your government at that point?
Well, first of all, there is nothing tangible, and an MOU, if it were to exist, doesn't change that. It would be our assumption that if they're talking about British Columbia, that British Columbia would be involved in that. And we've been very clear about our position. In any event, really, this is speculation about an MOU. It's hard to comment on an MOU that I haven't seen and hasn't been discussed with me. But this doesn't change the reality of the situation. And we've been actually quite open to Alberta's needs and wishes. As you know, we've just built a pipeline, a major pipeline from Alberta to the coast here in Burnaby and in the Port of Vancouver. Right, it's more than tripled the oil passing from Alberta through British Columbia in that time, the TMX pipeline. It's not even full at the moment. It's about 80 to 87% full, depending on the month. And there is significant opportunity to increase the capacity there without building a new pipeline. It did cost $34 billion, I'd add, Andrew, and you know this. We paid for it. You and I own it, and all the other taxpayers listening to us own this pipeline for $34 billion. $18 billion of that was effectively written off by the federal government. So we truly own the pipeline, and we've massively subsidized it. That was a twin route what's being proposed here, if I may say, because really this is just press releases, is not a twinned route. So it would be a greenfield route across the north of BC. So for all of those reasons, the tanker ban, its impact on the BC economy, its impact on our leading the Canadian economy are significant and real. And of course, we've communicated that, like I say, publicly and privately.
Okay, well, let me ask you then about that potential expansion of the Trans Mountain pipeline and more tanker capacity to move that oil, because we've had Premier Danielle Smith say again today that it's not enough, that there needs to be pipelines in all directions. So what's your reaction when you hear that message?
Well, of course, I guess it's not enough. It's not the same thing as saying that BC hasn't been listening to Alberta. The fact is that we paid for this pipeline. $34 billion is not full, and it can be expanded. And if you look at, say, the report that the Toronto-Dominion Bank recently saw on pipeline expansion in Canada, not including transmission, they're talking about a possibility of 1.1 million barrels per day in expansion. There isn't a market for this. No one would pay for this at this price, and it has significant economic negative effects for British Columbia. So we have, of course, been positive, and we're trying to be helpful with Alberta. At the same time, in our view anyway, a publicly subsidized project that doesn't yet exist and that would undermine BC's economy isn't very positive.
Okay, we have a moment left with you, so I want to ask you about the wider political question here, because your premier has said that Saskatchewan and Alberta are essentially attacking the BC economy by trying to end the tanker ban. Danielle Smith is saying she hopes your government believes in Team Canada and making sure provinces cooperate to get their products to market. So leaving aside what you've talked about with the Trans Mountain pipeline and potentially expanding that, as Canadians watching this from coast to coast, is there any chance that we are going to see your two provinces finding more common ground on this?
Well, Alberta and Saskatchewan's position, I guess, is they'll get what they want, and they want what they want. Our position is to reach out to Alberta, and as we have. You talk about the expansion of the TMX pipeline. I mean, we're talking about access to Asian markets for Alberta. And those are difficult issues. They've been difficult debates in BC. The pipeline's been built in BC at a cost of $34 billion, massively subsidized by all taxpayers in Canada. And I think it makes sense to use that. That's not being negative to Alberta. That's being supportive of Alberta. At the same time, the tanker ban would damage BC's economy, and this project would go through British Columbia, and we should have a say in that. So we're supporting Alberta. We're supporting Team Canada. We're leading it with projects from the North Coast Transmission Line to mining projects to LNG projects. We're leading that. Many of those projects, by the way, Andrew, our projects also benefit Alberta, as you well know. So we're going to continue to work on Team Canada, continue to lead Canada, and also, of course, defend our coast and defend our economy in BC, for which there is a lot at stake here.
Okay, we have to leave our conversation there. Minister Adrian Dix, really appreciate your time on this.
Great to be on the show, Andrew, anytime.